I'm Elizabeth Morgan, 32. And 1 week ago, my father slapped me across the face at our family dinner when I questioned the ethics of our pharmaceutical company. The room froze as he screamed, "You're cut from the will! You were never truly a Morgan!" Security dragged me from our Boston mansion while my family watched coldly. Only my mother cried silently. Yesterday, a manila envelope arrived from an unknown lawyer. The DNA test confirmed what that cryptic envelope suggested. The Morgans weren't my real family after all. Wow. I still feel my hands shaking as I type this. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong in your family, trust me when I say I understand that feeling on a whole different level now. Before I continue with how my entire identity was shattered, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know your city. And if stories about family secrets and justice being served are your thing, hit that subscribe button, because this story is just getting started. Growing up as a Morgan meant growing up in the lap of luxury on Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most prestigious neighborhoods. Our brownstone mansion stood tall and imposing, much like my father Harrison himself. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American elite family. Harrison Morgan, 67, built Morgan Pharmaceuticals from what his father started into a billion-dollar empire. My mother Catherine, 62, played her role as the socialite wife perfectly, hosting charity galas and sitting on museum boards. My older brother Ethan, 36, was the golden child, following in our father's footsteps as CFO of the company. My sister Abigail, 34, was Daddy's favorite, heading the marketing department with an uncanny ability to charm any client or investor. And then there was me, Elizabeth Morgan, the black sheep. While my siblings studied business at Harvard, I chose journalism at Columbia. While they played golf with potential investors, I was investigating corporate corruption. While they nodded along to father's business decisions, I questioned the ethics behind them. Elizabeth has always been different, Mother would say with a strange undertone I couldn't quite place. Was it pride? Worry? Something else entirely? Looking back, there were so many signs I missed. Mother was oddly overprotective of me compared to my siblings. When I was 7, I fell off my bike and scraped my knee. Mother reacted as though I'd been in a catastrophic accident, rushing me to the hospital for what was barely a scratch. "She's just sensitive about you," Ethan would say dismissively. Then there were the physical differences. Both my siblings had straight blonde hair and father's deep-set blue eyes. I had wavy auburn hair that Mother insisted on highlighting blonde, and hazel eyes. "You take after your grandmother," she'd always explain when I mentioned it. But looking at grandmother's photos never revealed the resemblance, she claimed. Our family dynamics revolved around Morgan Pharmaceuticals. Sunday dinners inevitably turned into business discussions about stock prices, new market opportunities, and competitor strategies. I sat silently through most of them, feeling like an outsider watching a movie about a family that wasn't quite mine. Ironic that I became an investigative journalist specializing in corporate corruption when our family business had so many skeletons in its closet. But perhaps subconsciously, I was always searching for truth. My recent engagement to Daniel Coleman only widened the gap between me and my family. Daniel came from a middle-class background and worked as a public defender. Father made no attempt to hide his disapproval. A public defender? Really, Elizabeth? You could have any man in Boston and you choose someone who makes in a year what we spend on a weekend? He'd said after meeting Daniel for the first time. The tension between us had been building for years. But the real breaking point came when I discovered disturbing information about Morgan Pharmaceuticals. Through my journalistic connections, I found evidence that the company had been price gouging essential medications used to treat rare childhood diseases. Worse, there were internal documents suggesting the company had covered up serious side effects in clinical trials. I was torn between family loyalty and my sense of justice. For weeks, I agonized over what to do. Daniel was my rock through it all. "Lizzie, you have to follow your conscience," he told me one night as I paced our apartment. "If the roles were reversed, would you want someone to stay silent about something like this?" I knew he was right. These weren't just abstract corporate ethics issues. Real children were suffering because medications were priced out of reach. Real patients weren't being warned of potential risks. The annual Morgan family business dinner was approaching, where father traditionally announced major company developments for the coming year. It was attended only by family members who would someday control the company. I decided this was where I would confront him with what I knew, hoping against hope that maybe he wasn't aware of what was happening in his own company. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe we could fix it. I couldn't have been more wrong. The Morgan family business dinner always took place in the formal dining room of the estate. The antique mahogany table gleamed under crystal chandeliers, fine china and silver were meticulously arranged, and the family portraits of Morgan patriarchs watched from the walls like stern judges. This year was different though. I had brought Daniel as moral support, something never done before. The looks on my family members' faces when we walked in together ranged from mother's anxious smile to father's barely concealed contempt. "Elizabeth, I wasn't aware you were bringing company," father said, not even attempting to hide the distaste in his voice. "Daniel is my fiancé, father. If I'm to be part of this family's future, so is he," I replied, squeezing Daniel's hand for courage. Ethan awkwardly shook Daniel's hand while Abigail merely nodded before turning away. We sat down to an excruciatingly tense dinner, making painfully small talk about weather and Boston traffic. Finally, father rose for his traditional announcement. "Morgan Pharmaceuticals will be expanding into developing markets in Southeast Asia and parts of Africa," he began proudly. "Regulatory hurdles are minimal there, and we can introduce our products at a fraction of the development cost required in the United States." I knew exactly what that meant. Countries with fewer regulations where they could sell medications without the same safety testing. Possibly the same medications with covered-up side effects. "Father, before you continue, I think we need to discuss some serious concerns about current practices at Morgan Pharmaceuticals," I interrupted, my voice shaking slightly. The room went completely silent. No one interrupted father's speeches. Ever. I pulled out copies of the documents I'd gathered. These internal emails show the company raised prices on Unraveled by 8.0% after acquiring the patent. It's the only treatment for children's disease, and families can no longer afford it. Children are dying. Father's face remained impassive as I continued. And these clinical trial reports show that liver toxicity was discovered in early testing of Ventrilox, but was classified as statistically insignificant when it clearly wasn't. 3 patients have died, father. Ethan jumped in. "Where did you get those documents?" "That's proprietary company information." "Does it matter? Is it true?" Daniel asked quietly. Abigail leapt to father's defense. "You have no idea the complexities of bringing medications to market. The costs involved, the risks we take. Of course we need to recoup our investment. By letting children die? By hiding side effects?" I was standing now, voice rising. Father had remained stone-faced throughout this exchange, but I could see the vein pulsing in his forehead. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "So this is how you repay everything we've given you? By stealing company documents? By bringing an outsider to a private family meeting? By accusing us of criminal behavior? It is criminal and unethical. People are dying," I pleaded, looking around the table for any ally. Mother stared down at her plate. Ethan and Abigail glared at me. What happened next plays in slow motion when I recall it. Father stood, walked calmly around the table to where I sat, and without warning, slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the dining room. Daniel jumped up, but father's security appeared from nowhere, holding him back. "You've always been different," father spat, standing over me. "Always questioned, always fought, always been a disappointment. You were never truly a Morgan. And now, you never will be. You're cut from my will as of this moment." I held my stinging cheek, too shocked to speak or cry. "Harrison, please." Mother finally spoke, a strange panic in her voice. "Not like this." "Quiet, Catherine," he snapped. "You've coddled her enough." He turned to the security guards. "Escort them out. Their access to all family properties and accounts is terminated, effective immediately." As the guards led us toward the door, I looked back at my family. Ethan and Abigail avoided my gaze. Only Mother watched me, tears streaming down her face, a look of pure terror in her eyes that I couldn't understand. "Mom?" I called out, but she just shook her head slightly. Outside, Daniel held me as I finally broke down. What did he mean I was never truly a Morgan? I sobbed against his shoulder. "He's just angry, Lizzie." "It was a cruel thing to say," Daniel assured me, but something cold and uncertain had settled in my stomach. The aftermath was swift and merciless. By morning, my credit cards were canceled, my access to family accounts terminated, and my calls and texts to family members went unanswered. The only response came from Mother, a single cryptic text. "I'm sorry. This was always my fear." A formal letter from the family lawyer arrived by courier 2 days later, outlining my disinheritance and including a cease and desist regarding any information about Morgan Pharmaceuticals. The family I'd known for 32 years had erased me completely, but the true bombshell was yet to come. 1 week after being disowned, a manila envelope arrived at my apartment. There was no return address, just my name typed on a label. Inside was a business card for Simon Wilson, attorney at law, paper clipped to a bundle of documents. The first document was a birth certificate, but not the one I'd seen my entire life. This one listed different parents, Jessica and Michael Grant. "Daniel!" I called out, my hands trembling. "Daniel, look at this!" He came quickly from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. His expression changed from concern to shock as he reviewed the documents with me. A hospital record showed genetic testing had been ordered by Catherine Morgan when I was 4 years old. A yellowed newspaper clipping with the headline "3-year-old Jessica Grant missing from Boston suburb" showed a toddler with auburn curls and hazel eyes, my eyes. My hair before Mother started dyeing it blonde. "This can't be real," I whispered. But even as the words left my mouth, pieces were clicking into place. My different appearance, Mother's overprotectiveness, Father's emotional distance, the constant feeling of not belonging. "We need to find this lawyer," Daniel said, picking up the business card. "Simon Wilson." Finding Wilson took less than a day with Daniel's legal connections. His practice was small, tucked away in a modest building in Cambridge. The man himself was in his late 70s, with kind eyes behind thick glasses. "I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, Miss Morgan," he said, gesturing for us to sit. Or perhaps I should say, Miss Grant. "What is all this?" I demanded, spreading the documents on his desk. "Are you saying I was kidnapped?" Wilson nodded solemnly. "Jessica and Michael Grant were my clients and dear friends. Their daughter disappeared from a playground in Lexington in 1993. You were 3 years old." "That's insane," I said, even as my heart raced. "The Morgans are one of Boston's most prominent families. They couldn't just steal a child. Money buys many things, including the ability to make problems disappear," Wilson said. The Grants suspected the Morgans almost immediately. Catherine Morgan had been seen at the playground that day. She had suffered multiple miscarriages and was known to be desperate for another child. But the police dismissed their suspicions. Who would believe a middle-class couple accusing Boston royalty? "Why are you showing me this now?" Daniel asked, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Wilson removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "The Grants never stopped looking for their daughter. They hired private investigators until they ran out of money. They pursued every lead. Then, they died in a car accident when you would have been 15. I promised them I would keep the files, keep the case alive in my own way. When I saw the news about you being publicly disinherited, I knew it was time. I felt the room spinning." "So you're saying my entire life has been a lie? That the Morgans kidnapped me?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Wilson confirmed gently. "And I believe Catherine Morgan has lived in fear of discovery ever since." I remembered her panicked expression at the dinner, her cryptic text. "This was always my fear." "The Grants left everything they had to their daughter, should she ever be found," Wilson continued. "It's not Morgan wealth by any means, but it's something. A small house in Lexington, some savings, family photos and mementos." I broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably as Daniel held me. It wasn't about money or possessions. It was about identity, about having been stolen from people who loved me, raised by people who had committed an unthinkable crime, about having missed the chance to know my real parents. "We need a DNA test," Daniel said firmly. And then we need to go to the authorities. There's no statute of limitations on kidnapping. I looked at the newspaper photo again. The little girl with my eyes. The parents whose faces I could almost see in my own. I need to know the truth. I finally said through my tears. All of it. The DNA testing facility was sterile and bright, nothing like the cozy law office where my world had been turned upside down. Daniel held my hand as a technician swabbed the inside of my cheek. Such a simple procedure to potentially confirm something so enormous. It'll take a few days for the results, the technician explained. We're comparing your DNA against the samples that were preserved from the Grant case. Those days of waiting were the longest of my life. I couldn't eat or sleep. Every time I looked in the mirror, I searched my features for traces of people I'd never met. Had I gotten my hazel eyes from Jessica Grant? My chin from Michael? I pulled out old family photos, studying them with new scrutiny. How had I never noticed how different I looked from everyone else? I remembered birthdays where Catherine had insisted on dyeing my naturally auburn hair blonde, just like the rest of the family. I remembered Harrison's coldness, the way he never quite looked me in the eyes. Had he known all along I wasn't his? Had he resented raising another man's child? Memories resurfaced with new context. Catherine's panic when I cut my knee at age 7 and needed stitches. Was she afraid hospital staff would somehow recognize me as the missing Grant child? The way she never let me go anywhere alone as a child. The way she monitored my friendships. Had she been afraid I would somehow discover the truth? The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Daniel and I sat together on the couch as I put the phone on speaker. "Miss Morgan, we have your results," the technician said. "The comparison to the Grant family samples shows a 99.9997% probability of biological relation. You are definitively the daughter of Jessica and Michael Grant." Even expecting it, the confirmation hit like a physical blow. I wasn't Elizabeth Morgan. I was Jessica Grant. My entire identity had been a lie. "Thank you," Daniel said when I couldn't speak, ending the call. "What now?" I finally asked, voice barely audible. "Now we find what family the Grants might still have," Daniel replied gently. "And then we decide how to proceed legally." With Simon Wilson's help, we traced a living relative of the Grants, Jessica's sister, Linda Taylor, who still lived in Massachusetts. After a brief phone call in which I could barely explain who I was without breaking down, she agreed to meet us. Linda's home was a modest cottage in a small town outside Boston. When she opened the door, I saw my own eyes looking back at me. She gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You look just like Jessie." Inside, surrounded by family photos, Linda told me about Jessica and Michael Grant, my real parents. Jessica had been an elementary school teacher, beloved by her students. Michael was an engineer who built elaborate dollhouses for me in his spare time. They had met in college, married young, and tried for years to have a child before I came along. "You were their miracle," Linda said, showing me baby photos. "They called you their little butterfly because you were always flitting from one thing to another, never sitting still." The missing persons report detailed the day of my kidnapping. A sunny afternoon at a local playground. Jessica had looked away for just a moment to help another child who had fallen. When she turned back, I was gone. Witnesses reported seeing a well-dressed blonde woman leading a crying child to a black luxury car, but no one had gotten the license plate. "The police searched everywhere," Linda continued. "Your parents were devastated. They spent every penny hiring private investigators. Your mother couldn't go back to teaching. Your father worked double shifts to pay for the search. They never gave up hope of finding you." She showed me more photos. My parents at my second birthday party. My father holding me on his shoulders at a zoo. My mother reading to me in a rocking chair. "They died in a car accident when you would have been 15, Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "The only blessing is that they never knew what happened to you. They always believed they would find you someday." I felt Daniel's hand on mine, anchoring me as I struggled to process it all. "It's a lot to take in," he said softly. "I understand," Linda nodded. "But there's something else you should know. Your parents set up a trust for you. It's not much, but it's been gathering interest all these years. They never lost faith that you'd come home." I was shaking my head, overcome. "I don't care about money. I I wish I could have known them. Linda reached for my hand. You can. Through me, through their friends, through the things they left behind. You may have been raised as Elizabeth Morgan, but Jessica Grant is still inside you. I can see her in your eyes. In the way you tilt your head when you're listening, just like she did. As we were leaving, Linda pressed a small box into my hands. Inside was a butterfly pendant on a silver chain. Your mother wore this every day after you disappeared. She said that when they found you, she would give it to you. I think she'd want you to have it now. The pendant felt warm in my palm, a tangible connection to the mother I couldn't remember. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt something beyond shock and grief. I felt a spark of identity. I might not know exactly who I was yet, but I knew I wanted to find out. I don't know if you've ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about yourself was suddenly questioned. If you have, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you find your way back to yourself? While you're typing that comment, go ahead and hit the like button if you've been following my journey so far. It helps more than you know to feel less alone through all this. Kidnapping doesn't have a statute of limitations in Massachusetts, Sarah Chen explained, spreading files across her desk. She was the experienced criminal attorney Daniel had connected me with through his legal network. But building a case after so many years presents significant challenges. Daniel nodded. We need irrefutable evidence linking the Morgans to the kidnapping. Witness testimony, documentation, anything concrete beyond the DNA match. I felt simultaneously numb and overwhelmed. The idea of pursuing legal action against the people who raised me, despite everything, was almost too much to comprehend. Yet the faces of Jessica and Michael Grant haunted me. They deserved justice. Where do we start? I asked. Former household staff, Sarah suggested. The Morgans would have needed help raising a child. Someone might have noticed when you suddenly appeared. Using my journalist skills, I began tracking down people who had worked for the Morgan family around the time of my kidnapping. Most doors closed in our faces. The Morgan influence ran deep, and loyalty had been well purchased over the years. But not everyone could be bought. Maria Gonzalez had been a nanny for the Morgan family from 1990 to 1995. Now, in her 70s, she lived in a small apartment in Dorchester. When I explained who I was, her eyes widened in recognition. I always wondered what happened to you, she said, inviting us inside. I knew something wasn't right. Over cups of strong coffee, Maria told us how Catherine Morgan had disappeared for a day in 1993 and returned with me. She said they had adopted you privately, but there were no preparations. No nursery being set up, no adoption paperwork I ever saw. And you cried for days, calling for your mama. Catherine was frantic, trying to get you to stop. Did Harrison know? I asked. Maria nodded slowly. Not at first, I think. There was a terrible fight when he came home and found you there. I couldn't understand all of it, but he was furious. Later, I overheard him say something about fixing her mess, making it legitimate. Did you ever suspect I was the missing Grant child? Daniel asked. I saw the news reports, but what could I do? I was an immigrant with limited English. Who would believe me against the Morgans? I needed that job to support my family back home. But I always felt guilty. She reached for my hand. I'm so sorry. Next, we found James Patterson, the now retired detective, who had worked the original kidnapping case. He remembered it vividly. The Grants insisted Catherine Morgan was involved. He told us in his small retirement home apartment. We questioned her, but she had an alibi for part of the day. And the description from witnesses was vague. A blonde woman in expensive clothes? That described half the mothers at that playground. Did you search the Morgan home? Sarah asked. Patterson's expression darkened. We tried. Requested a warrant twice. Both times it was denied. The Morgans were major donors to the district attorney's campaign. Suddenly the case was taken from me, given to someone else who let it go cold. With Maria's testimony, Patterson's suspicions, and my DNA results, we began building a timeline. Catherine had been struggling with infertility and multiple miscarriages. She had been seen at the playground the day I disappeared. Shortly after, a child matching my description appeared in the Morgan household. supposedly from a private adoption with no paperwork. Sarah also uncovered medical records showing Catherine had been treated for severe depression and had been briefly hospitalized for a breakdown just 2 months before my kidnapping. "We're building a strong circumstantial case," Sarah admitted. "But we need more. Something that definitively places Catherine at that playground or you in transit to the Morgan home." The emotional toll was immense. Every night I woke from nightmares, fragmented memories of being carried away by a blonde woman, of crying for a mother who never came. Daniel held me through the worst nights. But the strain showed on both of us. We had postponed wedding planning indefinitely. "Whatever you decide to do, I'm with you," Daniel promised. "Whether that's pursuing criminal charges or just moving forward with your life." That was the question that kept me awake at night. What did justice look like in this situation? The Morgans had committed an unthinkable crime, stolen me from loving parents. But Catherine had also raised me, in her own damaged way. And going public would mean destroying Morgan Pharmaceuticals, affecting thousands of employees and patients who relied on their medications. I need to confront her, I finally decided. Before we go to the authorities, I need to hear the truth from Catherine herself. Sarah advised against it, but I was determined. I needed answers only Catherine could provide. And I knew exactly how to find her alone. The Morgan estate had multiple entrances, including an old service door near the kitchen that was rarely used. As a teenager, I'd often snuck out through it to meet friends when I was supposedly grounded. Now, I used it to sneak back in. I knew Catherine's schedule by heart. Every Wednesday afternoon, she tended her prized roses in the garden alone, dismissing even the gardeners for those few hours of solitude. It was her form of therapy, she'd once told me. Daniel waited in the car down the street, ready to call for help if needed. I slipped through the garden gates at exactly 2 o'clock, finding Catherine exactly where I expected, kneeling beside her white roses, pruning shears in hand. "Mother," I said softly. She startled violently, shears clattering to the ground. When she turned, her face drained of all color, as though she'd seen a ghost. "Elizabeth," she whispered. "You shouldn't be here. Harrison will." "I'm not Elizabeth," I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm Jessica Grant." Catherine swayed slightly, reaching for a nearby bench to steady herself. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." I took a step closer, pulling out the newspaper clipping with the toddler's photo. "I know everything, Catherine. The DNA test confirmed it. I was kidnapped from a playground in Lexington in 1993. You took me from my real parents." For a long moment, Catherine just stared at me, her breathing shallow. Then, like a dam breaking, she began to sob, covering her face with soil-stained hands. "I never meant to keep you," she said between gasping breaths. "You have to believe me. It was just. I saw you there, playing. So beautiful with your auburn curls. You looked up at me and smiled. And something just broke inside me. You stole me," I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. "You took me from parents who loved me." "I had lost 4 babies," Catherine continued, as if she hadn't heard me. 4 little angels, never born. Harrison was pressuring me for another child. Ethan and Abigail were his, but he wanted a third. Insurance, he called it, and I couldn't give him one. The doctors said it would kill me to try again. I stood frozen as she unraveled before me, telling a story that seemed both rehearsed and raw, as if she'd been practicing her confession for years while praying she'd never have to give it. "I just wanted to hold you, just for a moment. But then you came with me so easily, took my hand, and I thought, just for an afternoon. I'll give her ice cream and toys and then return her. But then we were in the car, and you started crying for your mommy, and I knew I couldn't take you back without exposing myself. So I just kept driving." "And Harrison?" I managed to ask. He was furious when he found out, said I'd lost my mind. He wanted to return you that first night, but it was already all over the news. He said we'd both go to prison, lose everything, lose Ethan and Abigail. So he fixed it. Used connections to create a false adoption record. Paid people to look the other way. Dyed your hair blonde to match ours. She reached toward me, and I flinched away. "You have to understand," she pleaded. I saved you from an ordinary life. I gave you everything. The best schools, travel, opportunities. I loved you as my own. You were mine in every way that mattered. Rage surged through me. You stole me from people who loved me. My real father built dollhouses for me. My real mother was a teacher. They spent every penny they had looking for me. They died never knowing what happened to their daughter. And you have the audacity to say you saved me? Catherine flinched as if I'd struck her. I'm sorry. I've lived with this guilt every day. When you started looking different from Ethan and Abigail, asking questions, I was terrified the truth would come out. Harrison wanted to send you to boarding school in Switzerland, but I couldn't bear to let you go. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I asked incredulously. That you were so attached to the child you stole that you couldn't bear to send her away? Footsteps sounded on the gravel path, and Harrison Morgan appeared around the hedge. His face hardened when he saw me. What is she doing here? He demanded. Catherine, I told you to cut all contact. She knows, Harrison, Catherine said, voice hollow. She knows who she really is. Harrison's expression shifted almost imperceptibly before settling into cold calculation. Whatever she thinks she knows can't be proven. And if she tries, she'll regret it. I have DNA tests, I said. I have witness testimony. I have evidence of the cover-up. You have nothing, Harrison spat. We'll say Catherine was mentally ill, that she acted alone, that she's delusional now. No one will believe you over us. To my shock, Catherine rose from the bench, standing between us. No, Harrison, no more lies. I'm tired of living with this. What we did was wrong. She deserves to know the truth. Harrison grabbed Catherine's arm roughly. Have you lost your mind again? Do you want to go to prison? Do you want to lose everything? I was backing away, suddenly afraid of what Harrison might do. But not before pressing the record button on my phone in my pocket. Security will escort you out, Harrison said coldly. Try to pursue this, and you'll find how little your evidence means against the power of Morgan money and influence. I walked backward, keeping my eyes on them. This isn't over. It is for you, Harrison replied. You were never a Morgan. And now you're nothing at all. As security approached, I turned and hurried toward the garden exit, heart pounding. But I had what I came for. Catherine's confession. Harrison's threats. All recorded. It wouldn't stand up in court on its own. But combined with our other evidence, it strengthened our case considerably. Daniel was waiting anxiously in the car. What happened? Are you okay? I played him the recording. Hands still trembling. This changes everything, he said quietly. They admitted it, Lizzie. They admitted everything. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. Let's go see Sarah Chen. It's time to contact the FBI. The FBI agents took my statement in Sarah Chen's office, faces impassive as they listened to Catherine's recorded confession. They asked detailed questions about the evidence we'd gathered, taking copies of all our documentation. This will be a high-profile case, the lead agent warned. The Morgans won't go down without a fight. I understand, I replied. But this isn't just about me. It's about Jessica and Michael Grant. They deserve justice. While the FBI began their investigation, I faced another decision. As a journalist, I knew this story needed to be told. Not just for justice, but to expose the true nature of the Morgan family and potentially protect others from their pharmaceutical companies' unethical practices. With Daniel and Sarah's help, I connected with Catherine Patel, an editor I trusted at the Boston Globe. She agreed to run the story with all the evidence we could legally share without compromising the FBI investigation. The headline ran on a Sunday. Heiress discovers she was kidnapped child. Morgan pharmaceutical family accused in 30-year-old case. The media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. News vans camped outside our apartment. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. Morgan Pharmaceuticals' stock plummeted as investors panicked. The company's board called an emergency meeting. Harrison released a statement through his attorneys. My wife has struggled with mental health issues for many years. While I was aware she brought a child into our home under unusual circumstances, I was led to believe it was a legitimate private adoption. I am cooperating fully with authorities to understand what truly happened. He was throwing Catherine under the bus, exactly as he'd threatened. To everyone's surprise, Catherine refused to play along. She surrendered to authorities voluntarily, accompanied by her own attorney, separate from Harrison's legal team. She released a brief statement. "I take full responsibility for my actions and will cooperate with the investigation. I ask for privacy for all children involved, both biological and adopted." As the Morgan empire began to crumble, I struggled with complex emotions. I had no love left for Harrison, whose cold calculations had perpetuated the crime for decades. But Catherine, despite her unforgivable actions, had shown genuine remorse. And Ethan and Abigail, who had been my siblings for 30 years, were caught in the crossfire of a crime they had no part in. A week after the story broke, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Ethan. Can we meet?" Just us. After discussing it with Daniel and Sarah, I agreed to meet Ethan at a quiet coffee shop in Cambridge, away from media attention. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. "I didn't know," were his first words. "I swear to you, Lizzie, I had no idea." "You never wondered why I looked different? Why I was treated differently?" I asked. "I was 4 when you appeared. They told me you were adopted, and I never questioned it. You were just my little sister." He rubbed his face wearily. "I've been going through old photos, and now it seems so obvious. But kids don't question their reality, you know?" I did know. I'd never questioned my reality either. Until it was shattered. "The company's in free fall," Ethan continued. "The board has removed father pending the investigation. I've stepped down too. I can't be associated with this." "I'm sorry," I said, surprised to find I meant it. I never wanted to destroy the company, just to find the truth. "The truth needed to come out," Ethan said quietly. "Not just about you, but about the company practices too. I was blind to a lot of things, Lizzie. Or maybe I just didn't want to see." As we parted, he hesitated. "You're still my sister, you know, blood or not. If you ever need anything." The offer hung in the air between us. Incomplete but sincere. The legal proceedings moved swiftly after that. The FBI found evidence that Harrison had falsified adoption records, paid off officials, and actively covered up the kidnapping for decades. Catherine accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Harrison in exchange for consideration of her mental health issues at the time of the kidnapping. I watched from the courtroom as Harrison was led away in handcuffs after his arraignment, refusing to look in my direction. The man who had terrorized my childhood now seemed smaller, diminished by the exposure of his crimes. While the criminal case proceeded, a separate legal battle erupted over the Morgan estate and company control. Harrison had indeed created a new will after our confrontation, cutting me out entirely. But his original will, filed with multiple law firms as is standard for estates of that size, left equal shares to all 3 children. Given that the new will was created after his crimes were discovered and under fraudulent circumstances, the judge invalidated it. Overnight, I found myself an heiress again, entitled to 1/3 of the Morgan fortune. The irony was almost too much to comprehend. The Morgan estate battle dragged through the courts for months. Harrison maintained his innocence despite mounting evidence, claiming he had been manipulated by Catherine's mental instability and had believed the adoption was legitimate. Few believed him, especially after Catherine's detailed testimony about his active role in the cover-up. Morgan Pharmaceuticals underwent a complete board restructuring. The scandal had exposed not just the kidnapping but the ethical violations I had initially confronted Harrison about. Federal investigations into price gouging and clinical trial manipulations began, with whistleblowers coming forward once the family's protective shield was removed. As the legal heir to 1/3 of the Morgan fortune, I faced a moral dilemma. Taking the money felt wrong, tainted by the crime that had brought me into the family. Yet simply walking away from such wealth seemed impulsive. "What would Jessica and Michael Grant want for their daughter?" Daniel asked one night as we discussed options. The question resonated deeply. From everything I'd learned about my biological parents, they had been compassionate people committed to helping others. Jessica had been a dedicated teacher. Michael had volunteered with a housing organization building homes for low-income families. They would want the money to do good, I realized. Working with ethical, financial, and legal advisors, I established the Jessica and Michael Grant Foundation for Missing Children. The foundation would use my portion of the Morgan inheritance to support families of missing children, fund advanced search technologies, and advocate for policy changes to prevent children from falling through the cracks as I had. Meanwhile, I continued connecting with the Grant family, learning more about my biological parents through their friends and relatives. Aunt Linda shared treasured possessions: Jessica's jewelry box, family photo albums, even a small teddy bear that had been mine as a toddler. "Your mother saved everything of yours," Linda explained, showing me a box containing baby clothes, first drawings, even a lock of hair from my first haircut. "She believed you would come home someday." The grief was complicated and overwhelming. I mourned parents I couldn't remember, whose love for me was evident in every memento they'd saved. I grieved for the life I might have had, the relationships lost to Catherine's desperate, selfish act. Daniel was my rock through it all. He suggested postponing our wedding until the situation stabilized. "We have time," he assured me. "Let's get through the trials and foundation setup first." I was grateful for his patience as I worked through my identity crisis. Who was I? Elizabeth Morgan, raised in privilege with an Ivy League education and connections throughout Boston society. Or Jessica Grant, daughter of a teacher and an engineer, stolen from a simple but loving home? The answer, I slowly realized, was both. And neither. I was forging a new identity that honored all parts of my story. Professionally, the case had given me a platform as a journalist. I used it to advocate for missing children and to discuss issues of identity and belonging. A series of articles I wrote about nature versus nurture in the context of my own experience was nominated for a prestigious journalism award. As Harrison's trial began, family secrets were exposed for public consumption. Catherine's mental health struggles, Harrison's controlling behavior, the dysfunctional dynamics beneath the perfect family facade. I testified, describing my childhood as the family outsider, always sensing something was wrong but unable to identify what. I was raised with privilege, but at the cost of my true identity, I told the court. Nothing can replace what was stolen from me. The chance to know my real parents, to grow up in the home where I was wanted and loved for exactly who I was. Harrison was convicted on multiple charges, including kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Catherine received a reduced sentence due to her cooperation and documented mental health issues, with much of her time to be served in a psychiatric facility rather than prison. Through it all, an unexpected peace began to settle over me. For the first time in my life, I understood why I had never fit in with the Morgans. The puzzle pieces of my identity were finally coming together, creating a picture that made sense. 1 year after discovering my true identity, I stood at the graves of Jessica and Michael Grant, placing fresh flowers beside the headstones. The autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet, a crisp breeze carrying the scent of approaching winter. "They would be so proud of you," Aunt Linda said, standing beside me. "Not just for finding the truth, but for what you've done with it." The Jessica and Michael Grant Foundation had already helped 3 families reunite with missing children and was funding innovative search technologies and support services across the country. Harrison Morgan was serving a 15-year sentence, his appeals exhausted. Catherine was in a minimum security psychiatric facility, receiving treatment for the mental health issues that had haunted her for decades. My relationship with my former siblings had taken different paths. Ethan had left Morgan Pharmaceuticals entirely, using his business skills to help run a medical nonprofit providing affordable medications to underserved communities. We spoke regularly, rebuilding a relationship based on truth rather than lies. Abigail had been harder. She had initially blamed me for destroying the family, unable to accept her parents' crimes. Gradually, as evidence mounted and Harrison's manipulations became clear even to her, she had reached out. Our relationship remained strained but healing. She had taken over a division of Morgan Pharmaceuticals, working to reform the company's ethical practices. Daniel and I had finally set a wedding date, opting for a small ceremony by the ocean rather than the society event Catherine had always envisioned for me. I had legally changed my name to Elizabeth Grant Morgan, honoring both the identity I had been born with and the one I had lived. I never expected to find peace in all this, I told Linda as we walked back to the car. But knowing the truth, as painful as it is, feels better than living a lie. I had met several of my parents' former friends and colleagues, people who had known Jessica as a child. They told me I had her laugh, her passion for truth-telling. From Michael, they said, I had inherited determination and analytical thinking. Nature had asserted itself despite nurture's best efforts to suppress it. The final piece of my healing journey had been a visit to Catherine in her treatment facility. I hadn't wanted to go, but my therapist suggested it might provide closure. Catherine had aged decades in 1 year. Her blonde hair now fully gray. Her posture stooped with the weight of guilt. I won't ask for forgiveness, she said when we sat across from each other in the visiting room. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that in my broken way, I did love you. That doesn't justify anything, but it's the truth. I couldn't offer forgiveness, but I could acknowledge the complexity of human brokenness. Catherine had committed an unthinkable crime born of desperation and mental illness. Nothing excused it, but understanding it helped me release some of my anger. Now, standing at my biological parents' graves, I felt a sense of completion. I would maintain limited contact with Catherine, never with Harrison. I would continue building relationships with my Grant relatives while preserving the positive aspects of my bonds with Ethan. And, hopefully someday, Abigail. Daniel and I had begun discussing starting our own family, a prospect that filled me with both joy and terror. Would I know how to parent without the dysfunctional models I'd grown up with? Could I break the chain of family trauma? Your parents taught you how to love in the short time they had with you, Daniel assured me. And you've learned what not to do from the Morgans. Our children will be blessed to have you as their mother. I traced the names on the gravestones one last time before turning away. Jessica and Michael Grant had given me life and had searched for me until their deaths. The best way to honor them was to live fully and authentically as the woman they had raised me to be for those first precious years, and as the woman I had become despite everything that followed. I was raised a Morgan, born a Grant, but ultimately, I've become myself, I told Linda as we drove away. And that's the greatest freedom I could have found. The truth had indeed set me free, though the path to that freedom had been more painful and complicated than I could ever have imagined. The slap that was meant to silence me had ultimately freed me to find my true voice and purpose. If there's anything I've learned through this journey, it's that the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw yourself or your loved ones? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you in any way, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of truth and justice prevailing against all odds. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to discover who you really are. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. And remember, your true identity is not determined by others but discovered within yourself.